At 12:01 p.m. Beijing time on Monday, July 6, 2026, a Chinese nuclear-powered submarine in the South China Sea launched a ballistic missile carrying a training simulation warhead toward the Pacific Ocean. According to a statement from a Chinese Navy spokesperson, confirmed by Xinhua, China's official state news agency, the missile landed accurately in the designated high seas area. The Chinese military did not identify the submarine, the specific launch location, or the type of submarine-launched ballistic missile fired. It did not need to. The Pentagon's 2025 annual report to Congress on China's military capabilities had already stated that in September 2024, China launched a DF-31B intercontinental ballistic missile from northern Hainan Island, a missile that flew approximately 11,000 kilometers before impacting the ocean near French Polynesia. What happened at 12:01 p.m. on July 6, 2026 was China's second ballistic missile test into the Pacific within a period of less than 10 months, and it was timed to coincide with something that was also happening simultaneously at a naval port in Qingdao, in eastern Shandong province, 100 kilometers to the north. At that same moment, on July 6, 2026, China and Russia launched Joint Sea 2026, the 15th consecutive annual joint naval exercise between the People's Liberation Army Navy and the Russian Pacific Fleet, confirmed in an official statement from China's Ministry of National Defense and independently verified by Al Jazeera, IRIA News, the U.S. Naval Institute, Anadolu Agency, and the Chinese Ministry of National Defense's own English-language website. A joint command was established at the Qingdao Naval Port. Command and tactical coordination exercises began immediately. The Russian Pacific Fleet's flagship, the guided missile cruiser Varyag, hull number 011, was already docked at Qingdao alongside the frigate Rezki, hull 343, the Kilo-class diesel-electric submarine Ufa, and the rescue ship Igor Belousov. China's Northern Theater Command deployed the improved Type 052D guided missile destroyer Kaifeng, hull 124, the Type 055 guided missile destroyer Anshan, hull 103, the Type 054A guided missile frigate Wuhu, hull 539, the Type 903A comprehensive replenishment ship Kekexilihu, hull 903, the Type 926 submarine rescue ship Yangqinghu, hull 847, and one submarine. The exercise will run through July 13, 2026 in the Yellow Sea. After it concludes, selected forces from both navies will conduct joint maritime patrols in unspecified areas of the Pacific Ocean, a submarine-launched ballistic missile test, and the simultaneous launch of a joint naval exercise with Russia, on the same day, in the same naval calendar. And the NATO summit opened in Ankara, Turkey, also on July 7, 2026, the very next day, consumed by the war with Iran, U.S. troop withdrawal proposals, European burden-sharing disputes, and President Trump's criticisms of alliance members who declined to join operations in the Strait of Hormuz. Nobody at the NATO summit in Ankara was, by any available account, primarily discussing what was happening in the Yellow Sea. By the time you finish watching this video, you are going to understand exactly what Joint Sea 2026 is, why it matters considerably more than its modest scale in ships and days suggests, what the 14 previous exercises in this annual series have built toward in terms of the actual military capabilities of the two navies that are conducting them, what the precise numbers of the naval balance between China and the United States look like as of mid-2026, and why the West is not silent about this exercise. Because it doesn't know about it, but because the institutions that would normally lead the response are dealing with a set of overlapping crises that have absorbed their attention at precisely the moment when what is happening in the Yellow Sea deserves the most sustained and specific focus it has ever received. Stay with me, because the significance of Joint Sea 2026 is not the exercise itself. It is what the exercise represents in the context of 14 years of accumulation, a naval fleet that has grown from a coastal force to the largest navy on Earth by ship count, and a NATO alliance that is simultaneously dealing with Ukraine, Iran, and an American administration that reduced U.S. contributions to the NATO force model without a plan for what replaces them. Let's start with what the exercise actually is, because the specific composition of forces matters for understanding what is being trained and what is being signaled. The Chinese Ministry of National Defense's official English-language statement, published July 7, 2026, confirmed that the Joint Sea 2026 exercise theme is titled Joint Response to Maritime Security Threats, and will include 3 phases: force assembly, harbor-based planning, and at-sea operations. During the at-sea phase, the participating warships will proceed to the Yellow Sea near Qingdao to conduct drills on joint reconnaissance and air and missile defense, anti-submarine warfare, surface strike missions, artillery drills, and joint search and rescue operations. After the exercise concludes on July 13th, some forces from both sides will conduct joint maritime patrols in the Pacific Ocean. The specific vessels matter. China's Type 055 destroyer Anshan, Hull 103, is one of the most capable surface combatants in the world, displacing approximately 12,000 to 13,000 tons fully loaded and carrying a universal vertical launch system with 112 cells capable of firing a range of anti-ship missiles, surface-to-air missiles, anti-submarine rockets, and land attack cruise missiles. The Type 055 is routinely compared to the American Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser rather than to destroyers, because its displacement and firepower put it in a comparable category to the United States' own heavy surface combatants. Russia's contribution, led by the Pacific Fleet flagship Varyag, a Slava-class missile cruiser commissioned in 1989 and continuously modernized, includes the Kilo-class submarine Ufa, a diesel-electric boat known for its extreme quietness at low speed, which has made Kilo-class submarines one of the most challenging platforms for American anti-submarine warfare forces to detect and track in shallow and coastal waters. The inclusion of submarines in the Joint Sea Series began only in 2025. Last year's edition, held near Vladivostok, was the first time submarines participated and subsequently conducted a joint submarine patrol in the Sea of Japan. Joint Sea 2026 continues that evolution, combining surface, subsurface, air, and logistics elements into what the exercise documentation describes as a task group capable of long-range strike, anti-submarine warfare, and submarine rescue operations. If you're finding this kind of specific, sourced breakdown useful, the kind that goes to the Chinese Ministry of National Defense's own official English language publication, the U.S. Naval Institute's independent coverage, and the Congressional Research Service report rather than paraphrasing a wire service summary, subscribe now. This channel covers these stories every week using primary sources, and the subscribe button means you get the next one when it drops. The Joint Sea Series began in 2012. The first exercise, conducted in the Yellow Sea, was a modest affair by any measure, a small number of surface ships from both navies conducting basic communication and coordination drills. In 2013, the series expanded to the Sea of Japan. In 2014, it moved to the East China Sea. In 2015, the drill scale increased to include 22 ships and 9 aircraft. In 2016, the exercise expanded into the South China Sea for the first time. In 2021, China and Russia began conducting joint naval patrols in the Western Pacific, a qualitatively different activity from a structured exercise because a patrol is not a scripted event with a defined end date, but an open-ended presence operation conducted in international waters at the discretion of the two navies. In 2023, a joint patrol went as far as Alaska and the Aleutian Islands, the closest point that the combined Chinese-Russian naval patrol has approached the continental United States. The U.S. Naval Institute's coverage of Joint Sea 2026, published July 6, 2026, confirmed that joint submarine patrols were added to the series in 2025 and continue in 2026. What began in 2012 as a basic communication drill between two navies that had limited operational experience together has evolved, over 15 annual iterations, into a structured program for developing genuine joint maritime warfighting capability. Shared anti-submarine warfare doctrine, coordinated missile defense procedures, joint command and control frameworks, and the kind of operational familiarity between the two navies' communication systems, signaling protocols, and tactical decision-making cultures that can only be built through sustained repetition over years, not through a single exercise or diplomatic declaration. The NATO Alliance Maritime Strategy document, published in late October 2025 and confirmed on NATO's official website, states with unusual directness that the deepening strategic partnership between Russia and China and their mutually reinforcing attempts to undercut and reshape the rules-based international order are a cause for profound concern. The same document describes China's rapidly expanding naval capabilities, its increasing use of dual-use military scientific vessels, and its surging presence in the high north and the Arctic as challenges that alliance maritime power must address. NATO is not silent about the strategic problem. But the mechanisms through which NATO is actually responding to that problem are, as of the week of July 7, 2026, heavily occupied elsewhere. The NATO Ankara Summit, which opened on July 7th, one day after Joint Sea 2026 launched in Qingdao, was dominated by 3 agenda items that left limited bandwidth for anything else. President Trump's criticisms of alliance members who declined to join military operations against Iran during the Strait of Hormuz crisis, U.S. Secretary of Defense Hegseth's notification to alliance military commanders that the United States would scale back its contributions to the NATO force model, with reductions including halving the number of U.S. strategic bombers available in a conflict, reducing fighter jets available by 1/3, and making 0 submarines available, as confirmed by the Congressional Research Service's July 2026 analysis of NATO summit issues, and European allies' concern about whether those reductions, together with Trump's stated interest in acquiring Greenland and U.S. troop withdrawal plans in Europe, represented a fundamental change in American commitment to the alliance. In that context, a NATO summit preoccupied with alliance cohesion, Iranian missile strikes on U.S. military facilities in Bahrain and Kuwait on July 7th, a Strait of Hormuz ceasefire described by CNN as on increasingly shaky ground, and the United States simultaneously managing active military operations in the Middle East, the specific question of what was happening in the Yellow Sea from July 6th to July 13th did not receive the kind of sustained Western institutional attention that its strategic context might otherwise have generated. The exercise is well documented in specialist defense outlets. The U.S. Naval Institute's USNI News published a detailed technical analysis on the day it launched. The Chinese Ministry of National Defense published the full participating vessel list in English. Al Jazeera reported on the Pacific patrol that will follow. What was notably absent was the kind of formal governmental response, the kind of coordinated Allied statement, or the kind of named senior official comment from any NATO member that the exercise's significance would seem to warrant, at least in the media landscape of a normal week when no other crisis was competing for the same attention. Subscribe now, because what I am about to describe in the next section is the number that puts Joint Sea 2026 in the context that changes how you understand what is being built behind it. And that number is not the count of ships in this year's exercise. The People's Liberation Army Navy operates more than 370 ships and submarines in its battle force, according to the Department of Defense's 2024 China Military Power Report, which constitutes the most authoritative, publicly available assessment of planned capabilities and is confirmed by the Congressional Research Service's April 2025 analysis. That same report projects the plan growing to 395 ships by 2025 and 435 ships by 2030. The U.S. Navy operated 296 battle force ships as of September 30th, 2024, according to official Navy data confirmed by the Congressional Research Service. The FY 2026 Navy budget plans for a deployable battle force of 287 ships. The CSIS analysis published January 2026, titled Unpacking China's Naval Buildup, confirmed that China now possesses the world's largest maritime fighting force operating 234 major fighting ships, missile or torpedo-armed ships or submarines displacing more than 1,000 metric tons, to the U.S. Navy's 219, a count that specifically excludes China's approximately 60 Hubei-class patrol combatants armed with anti-ship cruise missiles. The Wikipedia entry on the People's Liberation Army Navy, updated 2 days ago on July 7, 2026, states that the plan is the second largest Navy by total displacement tonnage at 2 million tons in 2024, behind only the United States Navy, and the largest Navy globally by number of active seagoing ships with over 370 surface ships and submarines in service, compared to approximately 292 in the U.S. Navy. The shipbuilding balance that underlies those numbers is the most consequential military-industrial statistic of the current decade. Office of Naval Intelligence Analysis, declassified and reported by the War Zone and subsequently cited in the Congressional Research Service report, estimated China's shipbuilding capacity at 232 times that of the United States. The 1945 analysis, published April 1, 2026, citing DoD data, confirmed that in a single recent year, China added 30 ships to its fleet, 15 of which were modern surface combatants, including cruisers, destroyers, and a third aircraft carrier, while the U.S. Navy grew by 2 ships in the same period. China has produced 35 Type 052D destroyers and 8 Type 055 destroyers in the last decade, compared to the U.S. Navy adding approximately 18 to 20 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers over the same period, according to SlashGear's analysis of publicly available construction data. The DoD report anticipates China growing its submarine force to 80 units by 2035. The U.S. submarine fleet is projected at 57 boats in 2030, while the AI analysis confirmed that the U.S. submarine depot maintenance backlog has rendered nearly 40% of the U.S. submarine fleet unavailable at any given time. The Congressional Budget Office's 2025 analysis of the Navy's shipbuilding plan projects a potential fleet size of nearly 390 battle force ships by 2054, a goal measured in decades at an average cost of approximately $40 billion per year in 2024 dollars. Here is the honest and specific assessment of where U.S. advantages actually lie, because this video is not arguing that the United States Navy is losing the naval balance today, or that the plan is ready to challenge the U.S. globally. The U.S. Navy's qualitative advantages are real, documented, and significant. The United States operates 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, each capable of carrying 70 to 80 aircraft, providing a power projection capability that China is only beginning to develop. China's 4 carriers, including the recently commissioned Fujian, are not yet comparable to a U.S. nuclear-powered carrier in sustained operational capability. The U.S. advantage in guided missile cruisers and destroyers, 73 American destroyers according to CSIS, provides a global power projection capability that China's 42 destroyers, predominantly optimized for regional A2/AD operations, do not yet match. The U.S. submarine force, entirely nuclear-powered with decades of operational experience, remains qualitatively superior to the plan's mixed nuclear and diesel fleet. The U.S. Navy's 700-plus F-35B and F-35C carrier-borne fifth-generation aircraft massively outclassed the plan's J-35 program, which is just beginning to field in very small numbers. And the U.S. network of bases, alliances, and operational experience across all oceans, Japan, Guam, Diego Garcia, AUKUS, the Quad, provides a global operational reach that the plan, which has conducted meaningful deepwater operations only since approximately 2012, is still building toward. But CSIS's wargaming analysis, cited in the Unpacking China's Naval Buildup paper, found that in a recent simulation of a conflict in the Western Pacific, China lost 52 major surface warships compared to between 7 and 20 U.S. equivalents. And even after those catastrophic losses, China still had more surface warships than the United States and was able to continue the naval battle. The CSIS analysis draws directly from Tangradi's study, cited in the U.S. Naval Institute proceedings, titled Bigger Fleets Win, which found that larger fleets won 25 out of 28 historical wars. And these are not Chinese government statistics. They are the findings of American defense research institutions, and they consistently conclude the same thing. The quantitative imbalance in hull count, in shipbuilding capacity, and in the production rate differential is not a problem that can be solved by pointing to America's qualitative advantages in individual platform capability, because wars of attrition do not reward qualitative superiority after the superior platforms have been destroyed. Joint Sea 2026 is not, in isolation, a demonstration of that fleet. It is a training program involving a handful of ships from both navies, conducting drills that Russian Rear Admiral Sergei Sinko described at the opening ceremony in Qingdao as reflecting the growing defense relationship between Moscow and Beijing. What it represents, in the context of 15 consecutive annual exercises and the trajectory of Chinese naval construction documented in every successive Pentagon annual report since 2010, is the continued systematic development of the operational capability required to use that fleet in coordinated action with a partner navy whose own Pacific fleet is the world's second most capable nuclear-armed maritime force. China doesn't need Russia's ships. Russia's Pacific fleet is, by most assessments, a declining force whose most capable platforms are aging. What China gains from 15 years of Joint Sea exercises is not Russian capability. It is Russian experience. Specifically, the operational experience of a navy that has been conducting submarine patrols, naval aviation integration, and anti-submarine warfare in the Pacific, the Arctic, and the Atlantic for 60 years, and whose doctrinal knowledge of how to conduct sustained fleet operations far from home waters is something the plan is still systematically acquiring. The question that nobody at the Ankara summit was primarily focused on in the week of July 7th, 2026, because the Iran war, the Hormuz situation, the U.S. alliance commitment questions, and Trump's complaints about European defense spending all took precedence, is the one that the plan's strategic leadership has been systematically answering year by year, exercise by exercise, ship commission by ship commission since 2012. It is the question of when the People's Liberation Army Navy's capability for coordinated, joint, sustained, multi-domain naval operations in the Western Pacific reaches the level required for its strategic objectives, whatever those objectives ultimately prove to be. Joint Sea 2026 does not answer that question. But it is one more data point in the 15-year record that the answer is being built faster than any naval construction program in modern history, is being built in full public view in the official publications of the Chinese Ministry of National Defense, and is being built while the alliance most directly concerned with the question is, in the week of July the 7th to 13, 2026, primarily focused on other things. Tell me in the comments whether you think the West's attention is being divided by design, whether the simultaneous launch of a Joint Sea 2026 and China's SLBM test on the same day as the opening of the NATO summit is a deliberate statement about where China believes its strategic interests and its strategic partners actually lie, or whether you think it is simply the routine cadence of a planned annual exercise that happens to fall at a diplomatically significant moment. I genuinely don't know the answer to that question, and I think the honest answer is that nobody outside the Chinese military's Strategic Planning Directorate does either. But the timing is what it is. And if you want to keep following what the Joint Pacific Patrol does after July 13th, where it goes, how long it operates, and what the next year's Joint Sea exercise builds on top of this one, subscribe now, because this story is annual, it is compounding, and every iteration tells you more about where this is going than any single exercise can.